All right, what's up, guys? Another episode here. Seriously, every time I start talking to you guys, the cement truck drives by. Without fail, I turn the camera on, he drives by. Anyway, we got DIY going today. If you guys have been following us lately, we're back now. No events for a while. Things can slow down. We can get back to starting to clean the shop. We can catch up on little projects, and most importantly, we can make some money. So we got Jameson's car here. It's a 328i. What year?
96.
96 328i. So first year. They didn't make a whole lot of those. And it's an auto, and he wants to make it not an auto. So we're gonna do a ZF swap in it, and I'm gonna show you how to do it. There is quite a bit of videos on this online, but I figured we hadn't made one, so why not add our little 2 cents to it. So it's gonna be a two-parter. Pretty much how to remove everything, what you need to remove, and then the parts that you need, and then installing those parts and wiring and just finalizing it and little things that are differences. Yeah, first things first, we're gonna get the exhaust off. So this is a fairly stock exhaust. The rear has been, the muffler's been cut off, and it just has straight pipes, but all the factory mounting pretty much is all there. So it's pretty much the same for you guys. So we will start up here at the front. These bolts, they start life as 15s. They, as the studs break on the headers, they get random bolts, and then they become lots of different things. So just see what they are. They're both very easy to get to. There's 3 on the front bank, there's 3 on the rear bank. I like to go ahead and remove those first because they are the most annoying part of the exhaust. So I'm gonna go ahead and get those off, and I'll show you. All right, guys, exhaust off. It was a little eventful. It turns out I was a little blind, and all of these mounts, which I was gonna show you, are 13s. They're not there. So when I undid the headers, it fell and was just hanging by one bracket back here. But for you guys removing the exhaust, you got, there's a 13 here and a 13 here that hold to these rubber mounts right here. There's one on each side. And then where your muffler is, there is a bunch of 13s that are kind of like these sandwich clamps. I guess this one's welded in as a spacer between these pipes. But there's just a nut on the bottom of each of those you can take off, or where the rubber actually mounts to the car, here and here is a big mount, and here is a big mount. You can just take off those 4 nuts and drop the exhaust that way. That's why I prefer to do it, because then those ones aren't 2 metal surfaces that are most likely very rusted together. So yeah, but yeah, now we're under it. Let's rip some stuff out. So we have our trans cross member, we have our transmission, we have our bolts that hold the transmission to the engine. We have our cooler lines over here, transmission cooler lines, and our drive shaft. Those are the things we need to get off, along with this right here. This is the selector cable from the actual shifter up top, and we'll go through removing all those things right now. First thing I'm going to remove is the drive shaft, and how I like to do it is there's the Guibo bolts here, and then the center support bearing nuts there. And since we're swapping the whole drive shaft, we're going to also remove the 4 on the back. This is a 96 car, so all 96 to 99 E36s have a 4-bolt rear, and in the US 94, 92, 94 have a 4-bolt rear, but in 95 M3s had a 6-bolt diff. So if you're manual swapping your very rare 1995 auto M3, then you're gonna need to find either a diff out of another car if you want to run the 4-bolt, or find a 95 specific manual drive shaft. But we'll get to that stuff later. 4 in the back, these are 17s, these are 13s. These tend to vary depending on cars. Factory, these would have been 18s, but a lot of times they end up being 17s, like out of an E30, or 19s out of a later car. the nuts can also be different sizes from the bolts because they're all the same size. They just have different heads on them for some reason. So I'm gonna go ahead and get all those off and then we'll go to the next thing. All right guys, Gleeble bolts are out. With this being automatic, I just pulled off this shifter part here so I could put it in neutral without getting back on top of the car. This is a 13 nut, you just loosen, and then this right here is a 17 millimeter nut, and then you can pull it down out of that, and then you can just shift this. And if just 2 clicks back is a neutral. So I'm gonna leave the center support up for now and do these back here. And like I said, these 4 are 17 millimeter nuts. My technique for doing this is to put I use a ratcheting wrench. If you don't have a ratcheting wrench, you can use a regular wrench on one, and then a pry bar or like a large flathead screwdriver on the other one, and pry against them, and then just move on to the next one. Instead of having a friend try to go in there and put it in gear or hold the brakes or something, you can do it all by yourself, and it's fairly easy. All right, we are all removed. I didn't show pulling out those 13s, just 2 13s, pretty self-explanatory. Now we're gonna go after the rest of the transmission. I'm gonna go ahead and droop it now. So I'm going to get the cross member off of here, and then this insulation is already like pretty much failed. So I'll work on getting that slightly out of our way. But our goal now is to access the 2 E14s that are on the top of the bell housing that go into the head, or I guess it's not the head, right below the head. Those are the only 2 that are actually hard to get to. And this is a later car, so the starter should be threaded, so that makes removing that fairly easy as well. So transmission cross member is 4 13s, and then if you want to just get it completely out of the way, you can either loosen this 13 mil nut, or you can take these 13 mil nuts off and just yank it down. So either way, it comes right off. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull the torque converter off inside of the transmission. If you really want to, you can leave the torque converter on the engine and just pull the transmission off of it, and you'll just end up leaking a lot of fluid. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pull it now since we have to pull it at some point anyway. So what you can do is, this one is already missing this dust shield that goes between the engine and the trans, so I can sneak right in there. But if not, you can either pull the starter, which is a pain, or there should be a cap in the dust shield right here that you can pull off, and you can get to these bolts. I remember them being 17s, but I'm going to line it up and find that. What I like to do is put a socket on the crank right here, and then just turn it until one lines up. 6 cylinders have 3 bolts. Remove those 3 bolts and you're done. All right, we got our 3 torque converter bolts out. Now I would go ahead and pull the 10 millimeter bolt that goes right here on the dust shield if your car has one, so you don't forget about it later. I always forget about that bolt, so be good. So my trans has some missing bolts, or some added bolts in, so I'll show you guys. So how these trans work is, this is a E10. This should be an E10. That's a 13. Then there is an E10 right there on the side, and then okay, so that's it for E10s. Those 3, and then there's an E14 above that one, but still below the starter. An E14 here, and then 2 E14s right below the head, and then the starter has 2 E12s. If they're the correct bolts on yours. And that's everything to get it out. If you guys feel nervous at all about the transmission coming out on its own, leave one of the 10s on the bottom in, and then it won't back out. But in my experience, they don't fall off. With the auto though, I guess from experience I'm talking more of the manual because it's sitting on the input shaft. With the auto, definitely leave it in. I will also say these are quite heavy automatic transmissions. Grab a friend if you don't have a friend, figure out some sort of transmission jack solution. Don't try and pull one of these down by yourself. I've done it before. It's not sustainable. Don't do it. So before I get to removing those bolts though, I'm gonna remove everything else that's attached. So we've already gotten our shifter cable. Now let's go ahead and get all of the harness that's attached. With this one being a 328, it's slightly different than the M3s. The M3 has a ZF 5-speed. I think this is still some sort of GM unit, if I remember correctly. But this one, we have a turn one right here. Just turn that counterclockwise, it pulls the pin. The reverse sensor is on top right here. I think with the M3 auto, the reverse sensor is over here. And then nothing on this side. So with the 328, those are the only two plugs. And then when it comes to our transmission cooler lines, so BMW does these different. It seems like every year they changed them. This one, the coolers go into the bottom of the radiator right here, but you're not going to want to fish all of these lines out with the transmission. So I would recommend getting a Sawzall or bolt cutters or something and cutting them right here. You're not going to have somebody that's going to buy this automatic transmission from you, so don't worry about damaging it. All right, so got all the bolts out. I ended up putting this E14 back in and then left this would-be E10. This is a 13. Because when I pulled everything out but that one, it was tilting so much. I don't really deal with a lot of autos, so without the input shaft in there of the trans, it kind of really wanted to fall off. So I put that in there just so there's no extra things. I want to break the oil pan or anything else. So we're about to put it down. If you guys are doing this on your back, on jack stands, I would definitely recommend putting a jack under the oil pan of the transmission. If you're doing this on a lift, I would highly recommend buying one of these Harbor Freight table jacks, table lifts, whatever they're called, for like 250 bucks. And if you work on your BMW quite often, these things are awesome for pulling engines, for pulling heavy transmissions, for pulling rear subframes. They're just awesome. So what I'm going to do is lower the lift down so the transmission is sitting on this table, and then just, you know, duck under here, pull out the last two bolts, pull it back onto there, and just lower it down, and it's out. All right, so with the auto trans, this is a little bit harder to get in there because of the oil pan, but I'm just going to pull those last two little bolts out. Impacts don't really clear, so just using an old-fashioned ratchet and sockets. So these are heavy. I'm pretty sure with fluid in them, they're over 150 pounds. So just be safe on this point. If you guys have watched our previous videos, we've definitely done some dumb shit with transmissions, but we try to not mess around with the autos because they're that much heavier. And here again is the wrong bolt. Grab that E14 that I left in this side. Cool. Now that should be everything. Let me just kind of pry a little bit. Don't pry too much on your oil pan. And that should be it. So, get the car out of the way. All right. Behemoth of throw it away. It is a GM trans in these. So it's probably some form of 4L30, something like that. Oh, junkyard trans. So somebody did replace an auto.
Oh yeah. That's surprising.
Cool. Well, so we'll go ahead and pull the flex plate off too, because you're not going to be using it. These are 19 mils. I just blast them off with an impact. And then that's going to be it for removing stuff under here, and then we'll get cleaned up and then we'll go inside the car. All right, we're going to start working on the inside. I thought it'd be easier, instead of me getting under there and showing you guys how the pedals mount. If you're doing this swap, it is easier just to grab the whole pedal box out of a manual car instead of just trying to grab the clutch pedal and add it on, because your pin here is going to be the wrong length and you're going to need a manual pin so it's long enough to go there. Your brake pedal is going to be like this wide and you're going to have to either cut it to fit with the clutch pedal. It's easier just to get the whole, when people sell pedals, they usually just sell the whole pedal box. So what holds this on is there's 4 13 millimeter nuts that go in that square, and those are the back of the brake booster. And then there's the clevis pin that comes out of the brake booster goes through right there. There's a pin that goes through there. It's got these kind of style clips on it. You just pry up on the one side with these with a screwdriver, and then they pull up off. So remove that one. You don't need to remove either of the pedals on an E36. It comes out whole fairly easily. And there's a 13 millimeter bolt right here. With your brake switch here, you're only going to have this one switch in the car. You're not going to have the clutch switch. You can just unplug that by pulling there and unplugging. You can just throw that away because we don't need to put that in this car. That's it for removing the automatic pedals. It's fairly straightforward, and then just take it away. And I would say even if you're just adding the clutch pedal, still take the whole thing out of the car and then add it outside the car and reinstall it. It is miserable working under the car or under the dash in these cars. So that's that part. So we'll leave that out here. I'm going to go over all the parts you need in detail before we install anything, so we'll come back to that and I'll show you things that we'll need on there. Another thing to make your life slightly easier, this car is already missing like all of the surrounds for the steering column and then the kick panel underneath. I recommend removing this entire, the actual like crash panel, kick panel that's behind the plastic piece also, just so you can see better. It just makes life so much easier. So to remove the plastic piece that's over it, there's Phillips head screw here, here, here. And I believe there's a couple underneath and then one on that side. And you can just pull that panel off. There's your speaker is under there, your door chimes, your door dinger is in that panel as well that you need to unplug. Besides that, there's nothing in it. I don't quite remember, so sorry guys, if the steering column, the bottom of the piece here blocks that or not. I don't think it does. But if it does, there's just a couple screws that come from the bottom to get to it. To remove this piece, there's 3 10 mils right there, and right there. So I'll go ahead and get that out of there right now. They're kind of deep in there, so get an extension on it. It has come to my attention that if you have an OBD2 car, your OBD2 port is also pulled onto that. So that looks like it just takes a couple Phillips head screws. I'm sure you can do this job with leaving that in, but I am a firm believer of if it's easy to get it out of your way, get it out of your way. So that when you're on hour 8 of this damn thing, you don't get frustrated and rage quit. After that, I'm not going to show you guys removing the actual pedals because I showed you out there, so we'll get that out. So I'm going to just jump in here real quick. I'm pretty sure with the E36 ones, is the key on this one?
No, it's in the slot.
This just pulls up. If I remember correctly. I could be wrong. But I think it's just a... Never mind, it's an Allen. I'll figure out what size Allen it is. I'll let you know. Alright, so it's a little Allen set screw, and it's an H3. So, get that out. That little thing. And it pulls out. Oh,
and that would only be with the luxury package, right?
No, just the other one wouldn't be wood, but it would still be the same shifter.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And then you can just kind of pull up from there. You got a few random plugs in there for your sport buttons and other stuff. I don't know if any of this stuff is worth anything, if you guys should like keep it. Maybe the wood one is. Maybe there's somebody that wants a nice wood one. This one's not cracked, it's in good shape. But you won't need it for your manual swap. The opening is exactly the same for a manual or an auto. So shift boots will clip directly into that if they're a factory shifted. I think I'm just gonna pull the entire center, this piece off, just to get some more space in there. So to do that, you have, all right guys, it's already pulled this stuff out, but I'll show you how. So the OBC is stuck in there. Oh, I promise I didn't break that, his was already like that. There's a little indentation in here that you can stick your finger through, and you can get to the behind the bottom of the OBC. You can just pull that forward, that just pops out. Then this also just pops out, and you have, before I spill that again, these 3 plugs or however many plugs you have depending on your car, and then your cigarette lighter. Those can all be pulled. Underneath your hazard switch, you have 1 Phillips there. I pulled out both the window switches. If you have a sedan or a convertible, you have more switches, just pull those out. And then there's, pointing straight up, there's a Phillips here and a Phillips here. And then with all that, I haven't tried yet, this should give it up, which it's not. Oh, I think I know what it is. I think this clips under this one. I think the rear needs to be slightly removed. Depending on what center console you have, they have a bunch of varieties of these things. They all though just pull out. All right, so there's a Phillips right here and a Phillips right here. So to do it right, we do have to remove the back part of the center console. So probably be a little bit easier for you because you probably don't have a fixed seat, but we're gonna make it happen. All right, so this car's already missing the armrest, which you can unbolt from the sides if you take the covers off like he did, or actually I think that might be the only way to do it in the car. And then before you move this, but there's just a couple Phillips back here underneath this cover to get the back of that done, and it just comes off. You can take off the e-brake boot, or you can just leave it on and move it around it. There might be a light or two sticking through the bottom in here. Some of them have them, some of them don't. But then once we get to there, then we can get to these last 2 Phillips that we're making it harder. Since we've come this far, we're just gonna remove the whole thing. So inside, there's another Phillips that goes completely sideways, directly behind where the OBC would be. So then there's this 10mm plastic nut here. So I'm gonna do a recap once we get this out, because that was a lot. So underneath here, directly under where your heated seat switches or your hi-fi switch or traction control switch, that panel. And there's one more screw that holds it straight to it. This is a royal pain, guys, do it the right way. All right, and it's out. So I can show you when it's out, all of them. So we have 2 screws here, which are here and here. 2 screws here, which are right here and right here. And then 2 screws that go straight vertical, like right into the bottom of the climate control. And then a screw there and a screw there that go to the side and the side. There's not a single clip on that thing. BMW didn't want that going anywhere. Now that that's out, grab all your hardware that you probably lost during that whole thing, and yeah, get everything together. Once you're in here, you have all your harnesses that you've unplugged with everything. Everything in here is color coded. The plug is the same as the switch you unplugged it from. Should be fairly easy to put it back together. The big one that you need for other stuff that we're going to be doing is this switch, which is the it goes into the automatic shifter. So this is what's going to give us our start signal. This is what's going to give us our reverse lights. This is what's going to give us everything that we need. Don't worry about damaging it, because we're probably just going to tap into the wires instead of this, but we can use these to jump to test, you know, what completes the circuit that we're looking for and what doesn't. So after you get that out of the way, but You got a 10 mil here. 10 mil here. And there's one more. And with that, you can remove the last, well, not quite the last, almost the last of all of the auto stuff out of your car. You got another plug in here. That's the lock so that it won't let it shift when the car's off. And then do a little finagling with this plate that goes through to get, this is where it goes through the floor to get to the the actual shifter. Just kind of wiggle it till it gets happy. You could maybe cut it on the bottom. Might make it slightly easier. Just find the way that it wants to come through. Oh, never mind. I don't know what that was. This right here is the connector that goes all the way your steering column and stuff, so that when you turn the key, it unlocks it. So that's it. Don't get any of your plugs stuck, because you need your stuff to work. Junk gone. This plate also has to go that was mounting in there. This is just, it's just pushed in. There's just a cup here that sits at the bottom. This just plugs the hole that we will be using for the manual to go through. There's nothing to punch out down there. There's nothing to remove. We're just ready to install the shifter there. I'm gonna put the bolts back in though to plug those holes, just so they're not just open to the bottom. There is one more thing that is on the removal side. It's we need to punch the holes in for the clutch line from the master to the slave through the firewall, and then also we need the one that goes for the supply from the reservoir to the master. But I'll show you both those when we install the pedals. So this light right here is like your transmission service light. If you're doing a manual swap and you don't want to change to a manual cluster, a manual DME and a manual harness, you can just leave all the auto stuff in there, and I'll show you like where you can just get it out of the way. But all you need to do is just take out your cluster. It's a it's a small Torx, like a T10 I think. There's just two of them. This car makes it easy because it has a quick release steering wheel. But remove your steering wheel if you need to get back there. Sometimes they fit past wheels, sometimes they don't. If you happen to have an E36 that's early, you're lucky enough with adjustable steering column, and you can definitely do it with the steering wheel in the car. And just let something just get slightly behind it, and you can just pop it down. And just be real careful getting it out. These tabs break fairly easily, but there's just little bulbs in the back, and we're just going to pull out the bulb. All these little things are your light bulbs, and if you look above them, there's little icons, and it shows you which each one is. There's our transmission cog with an arrow that it's that one right there, and you just need like a slight twist, and then they pull right out.
Are you taking bulbs out?
Yeah. We don't need auto transmission bulbs anymore. So we pulled that and popped it right out, and now when we plug it back in, we will no longer have a check transmission light. E36s are much easier than other cars, like an E34. Other ones will actually have like a transmission program, air, and some other things that you actually need to code out, or get a manual harness to get rid of all those lights. Whereas these ones are far easier. And while you're in there, if you have an ABS light and you don't want ABS to work, or your traction control light is all the way on and you just don't want that on, you can just pull the bulbs for anything you don't want. So that's it for what needs to be removed from the car. Stay tuned for part 2, and I'll show you everything that you need to have in order to do the swap, and then a rough overview of installing it. Most things we're going to do is just the opposite of this, so I'm not going to show you guys how to install a transmission. I will show you how to install a clutch. I will show you how to install the pedals slightly, but I showed you how to take them out. How to run the lines. I'll show you how to bleed a slave for the first time. Just simple stuff like that. So stay tuned for episode 2. I'm pretty sure it's just coming out tomorrow. So thanks for watching, guys, and appreciate it.